Between the Black Sea and the Caspian, in the lands where Europe ends and Asia begins, a remarkable empire once stood. It was Turkic in origin, Jewish in religion, and rich beyond measure, and for almost 3 centuries it controlled the crossroads of the world. This is the story of the Khazars, the kingdom that chose its faith like a business decision, taxed the Silk Road into prosperity, and became the greatest middlemen of the medieval world. This is Empires and Economics. To understand the Khazars, you have to understand the map. Standing between the Black Sea and the Caspian, the Khazar Khaganate commanded the narrow corridor that connected the Middle East to Eastern Europe, and every caravan, every ship, every merchant who wanted to move goods between those worlds had to pass through their territory. The Khazars were a Turkic people, heirs to the great nomadic empires of the steppe. In the 7th century, as the Western Turkic Khaganate fractured, a new power rose in the grasslands north of the Caucasus. By the middle of the 8th century, the Khagan had become the dominant authority of the Western steppe, and the Khazar capital on the Volga Delta stood at the junction of the world's trade. The Khazars never forgot their steppe origins. Like their nomadic ancestors, they moved with the seasons, raised horses, and governed through a class of mounted warriors. But unlike many steppe peoples, they understood something their neighbors did not, that the real wealth of their land lay not in what they could produce, but in what they could move. Control of the rivers was control of the world. The Volga carried the furs of the northern forest down to the Caspian. The Don opened a corridor to the Black Sea and to Byzantium. The Khazars took their position at the natural junction, and they made everyone pay for the privilege of passing through. Empires are built on taxation, and the Khazar Empire was no exception. Beyond their own lands, the Khazars ruled over a patchwork of subject peoples, Slavic tribes along the rivers, Burtus and Bulgars in the Volga forests, tribes of the Caucasus foothills, and every one of them paid tribute. According to the Russian Primary Chronicle, the Khazar tribute collectors demanded a weapon from each household and a squirrel's fur from each hearth, a tax so hated that the chronicler records the Slavic tribe's bitter complaint. It was a classic tribute system. The core took wealth from the periphery and in return offered protection, order, and access to the trade network. But tribute was only the beginning. The Khazars' genius lay in taking a cut of everyone's business, because their territory was the hinge on which 3 great economies turned. To the north lay the forests of the Rus in the Baltic, rich in furs, wax, honey, walrus ivory, and amber. To the south lay the Islamic world, rich in silver, silk, and spices. To the west lay Byzantium, the great consumer of luxury goods. Goods flowed in all directions, and the Khazars taxed them all, taking their percentage of the Volga trade in silver, their tolls from the caravans, their tithe on every ship that sailed their river. The most celebrated travelers of that age were the Radhanites, Jewish merchants whose routes, recorded by the geographer Ibn Khordadbeh in the 9th century, ran from the valleys of Western Europe all the way to China. Their paths crossed the Khazar lands time and again. They carried furs, swords, and fine goods west. They brought back silk, spices, and gems from the east. The Khazars hosted these merchants, protected them, and collected their tolls. In the Khazar Khaganate, trade was not merely permitted, it was the state's reason for being. Now we come to the decision that made the Khazars famous, and for centuries puzzling: the conversion of the Khaganate to Judaism. The story, as told in the Khazar correspondence and later Jewish sources, begins with a king named Bulan. According to the tradition, Bulan was visited by an angel in a dream who promised him victory if he adopted the faith of the God of Israel. Bulan sought the council of representatives of the 3 great religions of his realm, and after hearing their arguments, chose Judaism. Historians debate the details. The date is usually placed around the 740s, with a later ruler, Obadiah, strengthening the religion and building synagogues and schools. Why did the Khazars choose Judaism? The most likely answer is that it was strategic. To convert to Christianity would have made them clients of Byzantium. To convert to Islam would have made them clients of the Caliphate. Judaism belonged to no empire, it declared their independence. Perhaps just as important, a Jewish court was a powerful signal to the Radhanite merchants who carried the world's trade, and who now found a sympathetic power at the crossroads of their routes. The conversion of the elite was real and lasting. For more than 2 centuries, the rulers of the Khaganate were Jews, though ordinary Khazars continued to practice their old faiths. But the choice of religion, in an age of holy war, was a masterpiece of political economy. And with that choice came one of the most tolerant societies of the medieval world. The Arab geographer al-Masudi, writing in the 10th century, described the Khazar capital as a place where Jews, Christians, Muslims, and pagans lived together in peace. The king maintained judges for each religion, 7 judges, according to al-Masudi, 2 for the Jews, 2 for the Muslims, 2 for the Christians, and 1 for the pagans of the steppe. There was no forced conversion, no religious tax, no holy war. Every faith kept its own market, its own quarter, its own law. In a world where religion divided the great powers, the Khazars made toleration a commercial policy, and the merchants rewarded them for it. What did this trade actually look like? The silver coins tell the story. Beginning in the 9th century, enormous hordes of Islamic dirhams began appearing in Scandinavia and the Baltic. Tens of thousands of coins struck in the mints of the Samanid dynasty of Central Asia, which had traveled north across the Khazar lands. In Sweden and Gotland, in the river towns of the Rus, archaeologists have found more silver from the Islamic world than anywhere else on earth, and almost all of it had passed through Khazar hands. The Volga route worked like a pump. The Rus of the north, Scandinavian merchants and warriors, sailed their long ships down the rivers, carrying furs, wax, honey, and captives from the northern forests. They paid tolls to the Khazars as they passed, and they traded their goods for the silver of the east. This trade made the Khazar Khaganate genuinely rich, rich enough to build stone fortresses, to maintain a standing military force, and to be treated as a great power by the emperors of Byzantium, who sought Khazar alliance through diplomacy and marriage, and by the caliphs of Baghdad, who spoke of the Khazar king with respect. One monument from those years still stands in the historical record, the fortress of Sarkel. In the 830s, with the help of Byzantine engineers sent at the request of the Khagan, the Khazars built a stronghold of white stone on the Don, guarding the portage where goods were hauled overland between the Volga and the Black Sea routes. It was the Khazar answer to a changing world, a fortified toll gate on the frontier, protecting the trade that was their lifeblood. Every middleman is only as strong as the routes they control, and in the 10th century the Khazars' control began to crack. New peoples pressed in from the steppe, the Pechenegs from the east, the Magyars displaced westward. But the true threat came from the north. The Rus of Kiev, who had once paid tribute to the Khazars, were becoming a power in their own right, and they had learned the value of the river trade. In 965, the Kievan prince Sviatoslav marched down the Don and took Sarkel. A few years later, his forces fell upon the capital itself, and the great trading city on the Volga was taken, its buildings razed, its inhabitants scattered. The Khazar Khaganate vanished from the map almost overnight. Some Khazars took refuge in the cities of Crimea and the Taman Peninsula, where their descendants may be traced among later Jewish communities. Many were absorbed by the peoples of the steppe. Within a century of the fall of Itil, the Khazars had become a memory, remembered chiefly and ironically by the very empires that had replaced them. And yet their story did not end. In the 20th century, a popular theory argued that the Khazars were the ancestors of the Ashkenazi Jews of Europe. Genetic studies have since weighed in, and modern population genetics finds that Ashkenazi Jews cluster most closely with Middle Eastern and Southern European Jewish populations, not with the peoples of the Caucasus or the steppe. The Khazar theory in its strong form has been largely rejected, but the historical kingdom remains real, and its achievement stands on its own. What does the Khazar Khaganate teach us? 3 things, perhaps. First, that geography is destiny. Whoever controls the junction of trade routes controls the wealth those routes carry. Second, that tolerance can be a competitive advantage. The Khazars prospered because they welcomed every merchant, whatever their faith. And third, that an economy built only on passage, on being the middleman, is always one corridor away from collapse. The Khazars built no lasting monuments, founded no enduring dynasty. But for 3 centuries, at the hinge of the medieval world, their kingdom was the toll booth of the Silk Road, and for a brief, brilliant moment, the Jews of the steppe ruled the crossroads of Asia. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Empires and Economics, consider subscribing and join us next time as we uncover the hidden economies of the ancient world. Sources: Khazar Correspondence, Hasdai Ibn Sheprat and King Joseph, Ibn Fadlan, al-Masudi, Ibn Haqqal, Ibn Khordad Bey, Book of Roads and Kingdoms, Constantine Porphyrogennetos, De Administrando Imperio, Russian Primary Chronicle, Brook, 2018, Golden, 1980, Dunlop, 1954, Noonan, 2007,